For the last 100 years, we've relied on this incredibly durable metaphor for professional life, the career ladder. It's structural, it's linear, and crucially, the bottom rungs are always there.
Right, they have to be.
Exactly. You come out of school, you do the routine work, the spreadsheet formatting, the basic coding, the data entry.
The grunt work.
Yeah, the grunt work. You learn the ropes, and slowly, you build the context to climb.
Right, it's an apprenticeship of drudgery, essentially. You put in your time in the trenches to earn the right to make the strategic decisions later on.
But that ladder is gone. Based on the macroeconomic data rolling in right now, we've replaced the ladder with an elevator. And the problem is, the first 5 floors have been completely hollowed out by artificial intelligence. Welcome to the debate. Today, we are exploring the impact of AI on the global labor market.
And we're really trying to move past that initial shock of job displacement.
Yes.
We are zeroing in on the actual mechanics of survival. What are the specific, actionable skills a worker needs today to thrive in an AI-driven economy?
Because we aren't just theorizing here. We're looking at the reality laid out in recent massive economic analyses.
Right, like PwC's 2026 Global AI Jobs Barometer.
Exactly. That, along with the World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs report, and the labor restructuring research coming out of Goldman Sachs, the consensus is incredibly clear. The window for passive observation has officially closed. It has. And my perspective on this is that AI poses a profound structural threat that completely invalidates our old ways of working. To survive, I argue we have to fundamentally shift away from traditional technical training. The safe harbor isn't learning a new software tool, it's doubling down on uniquely human cognitive capabilities, specifically things like critical judgment, complex problem framing, and deep empathy.
And my position is quite different. I view AI primarily as an unprecedented tool for worker augmentation. Retreating into a philosophical bunker of soft skills is a mistake that will get people laid off. Surviving this transition depends on pragmatic, aggressive AI literacy, and specifically, learning to command what we call agentic AI to radically scale your own output.
Let's start with the sheer scale of what is happening, because I think a lot of professionals still believe this is just a slightly better search engine.
Oh, for sure. They do.
But the World Economic Forum projects 92 million jobs will be eliminated globally by the end of the decade. Goldman Sachs puts the U.S. exposure at about 15 million displaced workers. And this isn't some distant projection, right? IBM already paused hiring for nearly 8,000 back-office positions because AI can do those jobs right now.
Right. The Stanford researchers are tracking a 16% decline in AI-exposed entry-level jobs across the board. The disruption is massive. Nobody is denying that.
But it's devastating.
It is. But stopping at the displacement numbers completely ignores the second half of the equation. Yes, the WEF predicts 92 million jobs eliminated, but they also predict 170 million new positions created by this exact same technological shift. We are looking at a net gain of 78 million jobs globally.
Right, but that macro-level net gain, it completely masks a brutal distributional reality on the ground. The people losing the 92 million jobs are not automatically the ones sliding into the 170 million new ones.
Which is why the transition strategy is so vital. If you look at the PwC report, the companies achieving the biggest productivity gains from AI are not laying everyone off. They are actually boosting their headcount.
In certain departments, sure.
In general. And they are paying higher wages. They are using AI to amplify human performance. PwC coined a brilliant phrase in their analysis, actually. They said, you won't lose your job to AI, you will lose it to someone who knows how to use AI.
Let's test that theory on the specific battleground where this disruption is hitting the hardest right now, the entry-level job market.
Okay.
Because this is where the augmentation argument starts to show cracks. You and I agree that young workers are facing a completely transformed landscape. AI excels at the exact routine, predictable tasks that used to serve as their informal apprenticeship.
Right. The data entry, the basic summaries.
Exactly. But PwC's data shows something terrifying. Junior roles that are highly exposed to AI are now 7 times more likely to demand traditionally senior skills than roles that aren't exposed. They are suddenly asking 22-year-olds for motivational leadership, stakeholder management, and complex strategic decision-making.
Well, I wouldn't call that terrifying. I call it acceleration of human potential.
But walk me through the mechanics of that. If we've handed the data entry, the basic coding, and the spreadsheet formatting to the machine, how does a 22-year-old develop the strategic judgment of a senior executive without the 10 years of practice they used to get?
That assumes the old way was the only way to learn.
We have completely removed the scaffolding. You don't just wake up at 22 with an intuitive grasp of market dynamics. You used to build that intuition by swimming in the raw data for years.
You're right that the traditional scaffolding is gone, but it isn't missing. It's being rebuilt using entirely different materials. If you zoom in on that same PwC data, those seniorized entry-level roles, the ones demanding those advanced skills early on, they've actually seen 35% growth since 2019.
Wait, really? 35%?
Yes. Companies are hiring for these roles and young people are succeeding in them.
But how? How are they acquiring the judgment without the reps?
Through a fundamental reinvention of mentorship and onboarding. The reps haven't disappeared. The nature of the reps has changed. We used to teach a junior financial analyst by having them build a financial model from scratch, cell by cell, over a week.
Right, which taught them how the model works.
But today, the AI builds the model in 10 seconds. So the mentorship shifts. The senior manager sits down with the 22-year-old and says, here is the AI's output. Find the 3 assumptions it made that misunderstand our client's risk tolerance. The junior employee is no longer learning by assembling, they are learning by auditing and editing.
But editing requires a baseline of knowledge. You can't audit what you don't understand.
And they are building that knowledge rapidly. Look at the Coursera data highlighted in the WEF report. 3.2 million enrollments in generative AI training in a single year, driven heavily by young workers. They aren't waiting for corporations to figure this out.
Well, they can't afford to wait.
Exactly. They realize they don't need to spend 5 years learning the technical syntax of a task if they can use an AI tool to bypass the syntax and focus entirely on the logic and the strategy. They are leapfrogging the drudgery.
I completely agree that the role of the human is shifting from creator to editor. But that shift is exactly why I argue we must abandon our old human capital models. Historically, human capital meant what you had memorized, your technical knowledge, your syntax, your ability to recall formulas.
Sure.
Economist Amartya Sen argued for a capability approach, which focuses not on what a person has memorized, but what they are actually capable of doing and being in a complex environment. If the machine holds the database, the human's only value is in their judgment.
I agree. Judgment is critical.
Right, but what does judgment actually look like? Professor Hung-Yi Chen's recent 2026 analysis points to a framework of uniquely human capabilities. AI is incredibly good at finding optimal solutions within a well-defined problem space. If you give it the parameters, it will solve the puzzle perfectly.
Because that's math.
Yes, but it is entirely incapable of complex problem framing. It cannot look at a messy, ambiguous social situation and ask the right questions. Einstein famously said if he had an hour to solve a problem, he'd spend 55 minutes figuring out what the problem is and 5 minutes solving it. AI is the 5 minutes.
Right, but AI can also help you brainstorm the 55 minutes if you know how to prompt it.
It can generate options, absolutely, but it cannot exercise critical judgment over which of those options aligns with human ethics, organizational culture, or nuanced social contexts. This is why the survival toolkit has to be built around what's called the EPOC Framework: empathy, presence, opinion, creativity, and hope.
Hope? Really?
Yes, but let's focus just on opinion for a second. Having a distinct point of view, grounded in lived human experience, is unautomatable. PwC found that the new tasks being added to AI-exposed roles are 2.5 times more likely to rely on these human-intensive capabilities.
Look, I don't disagree that having an opinion is valuable.
Think of generative AI as a massively powerful engine. It can propel your organization at incredible speeds. But it doesn't have a steering wheel. Human judgment, specifically those EPOC skills, is the steering wheel required to navigate the ambiguity AI creates. If you just train a junior employee to command the engine without actively building their capacity for empathy and opinion, they are going to crash the company at scale.
I understand the appeal of the EPOC framework. Empathy and human presence are wonderful traits. But relying on them as your primary shield against automation is a defensive, almost philosophical retreat.
It's the only thing the machine can't do.
It sounds good in a textbook, but it doesn't survive contact with the modern marketplace. Let me explain why. Relying solely on being a deep, critical thinker ignores the brute force economics of scale. This is where AI literacy, and specifically agentic AI, becomes the true force multiplier.
Let's unpack agentic AI for a moment because the term gets thrown around loosely as a buzzword. What does commanding agentic AI actually look like for a non-developer?
That's a fair question. Most people still think of AI as a chatbot. You ask a question, it gives you a paragraph. That's passive. Agentic AI involves giving an AI system a complex, multi-step goal, and the AI autonomously breaks that goal down into subtasks, utilizes different software tools, and executes them in sequence.
Give me a practical example.
Sure. Instead of writing a prompt to get a draft of an email, a mid-level manager uses agentic AI by saying, find all clients whose contracts renew in Q3, cross-reference their usage data in our CRM, identify the features they aren't utilizing, and draft customized outreach emails for each, queuing them up in my outbox for review. The AI acts as a team of specialized agents. One pulls data, one analyzes, one writes.
But my argument is that the manager still has to review those emails using empathy and opinion to ensure they don't alienate the client.
Of course. But here is the critical difference. PwC's performance study found that companies getting the most value from AI are twice as likely to deploy these autonomous agents. The ultimate complement to human expertise isn't just being empathetic, it's commanding a digital workforce.
But they still need the empathy to review the output.
Yes. But the people who survive this transition won't just be deep thinkers. They will be the workers who understand how to design these workflows, how to implement modular AI architectures, which really just means snapping different specialized AI tools together like Lego blocks to automate a whole process.
So your survival strategy is pure operational leverage?
Exactly. Your highly empathetic worker with great judgment might perfectly frame one complex problem a week. But if my worker who has basic AI literacy can command a team of 5 agents to execute a good enough strategy across 10,000 clients in an afternoon, my worker's economic output crushes yours. Investing in human skills is fine, but investing in human skills alongside aggressive AI skills is the only way to win. You have to become the conductor of the orchestra.
But if the orchestra increasingly plays itself, the conductor is only needed to decide what song to play, which brings us right back to critical judgment and opinion. And I have to push back on your point about scale, because it ignores the fundamental economic mechanics of what happens when a capability becomes widespread. Let's look at the structural reality of the two-track labor market that PwC's analysis over 1 billion job ads uncovered. AI is causing occupations to split into 2 very distinct paths: democratization and professionalization.
The two-track split is definitely happening, yes.
And the mechanics of that split are vital to understand. Democratization happens when technology lowers the barrier to entry for complex tasks. It makes it incredibly easy for non-experts to do specialized work. The economist David Autor uses a brilliant analogy for this. Think about taxi drivers in London.
The knowledge.
Right. Before GPS, drivers had to memorize the knowledge, every street, every route. It took years to master, and because it was a scarce human capability, it commanded a premium wage.
And then GPS arrived.
Right. GPS democratized the specialized knowledge of navigating a city. Suddenly, anyone with a smartphone could drive an Uber. What was the economic result? The number of drivers soared, but because the skill was no longer scarce, wages plummeted.
I see where you're going with this.
If we focus all our upskilling efforts purely on teaching people to use AI tools, if we just teach them to design workflows and use agentic AI, we are steering them straight into democratized roles. We are turning them into the Uber drivers of the knowledge economy. They will be easily replaced by the next person who downloads a slightly better AI agent, and their wages will stagnate.
That is a very static view of a highly dynamic technology, though. Democratization is not inherently a bad thing for society, and it isn't necessarily a death sentence for wages if you are adaptable.
For wage growth, historically, an infinite supply of a skill drives the price of that skill to zero.
That assumes the demand for services is fixed. It isn't. McKinsey's 2025 report highlights that AI is democratizing experiences that were previously
incredibly expensive or exclusive. Think about high-end career coaching, or complex tax advice, or custom digital animation.
Okay, true.
By lowering the barrier to entry, AI makes these services affordable to millions of people who couldn't access them before. When the cost of a service drops, the demand for it often explodes, creating massive new markets.
I don't disagree that it creates new markets, but does it create high-paying jobs within those markets? Let's look at the other track in PwC's data, professionalized roles. This is the track where AI automates the routine tasks, but the core of the job heavily emphasizes deep human judgment, physical presence, or complex stakeholder trust.
Right.
PwC found that roles on this professionalized track are seeing 42% higher wage growth. They are growing twice as fast as democratized roles.
Because they are augmenting, not just automating.
No, because they rely on skills that AI cannot democratize. You cannot democratize genuine human trust. You cannot democratize physical presence or deep emotional connection. If a worker wants economic security, if they want to see their wages grow, they have to intentionally move toward the professionalized track. And you do that by doubling down on those EPOC skills.
I hear you, but frankly, telling the global workforce that their only salvation is to become highly empathetic, strategic thinkers borders on elitist.
Elitist? How?
Well, not everyone is going to be a senior executive, a bespoke strategic consultant, or a therapist. For millions of mid-level knowledge workers, the focus has to be on practical, individual adaptability.
But what does practical adaptability mean, if not developing unique human value?
It means leveraging AI to transition out of declining purely routine sectors and into growing AI-augmented ones. If you are a mid-level supply chain analyst, you don't save your job by becoming slightly more empathetic during Zoom meetings.
No, but
You save your job by learning to deploy data analysis AI agents so you can process 10 times the supply chain data you used to handle. Even in democratized roles, workers who pair their work with basic AI fluency and basic social competencies can thrive because they are riding the wave of increased volume. The technology makes you faster, which makes you more valuable to the firm.
we are looking at the exact same data point, the fact that the rate of skills change for AI-exposed jobs has increased by 75%, and we are drawing two completely different survival maps.
We are, and we shouldn't gloss over that 75% metric, by the way, because the mechanism behind it is staggering. It means whatever technical, syntax, or software process you learned 2 years ago is already decaying twice as fast as it would have historically. The half-life of technical knowledge is collapsing.
Exactly, which is exactly why I argue that anchoring our survival on the technical mastery of rapidly shifting software is a fool's errand. You cannot outcompute the computer. The threat of mass displacement is a stark, unavoidable reality for anyone doing routine cognitive work. Millions of tasks are going to evaporate. But I genuinely believe this crisis is ultimately a catalyst for us.
A catalyst for what?
Obtain facts and perform repetitive logic. AI forces us to strip away the robotic tasks we've been pretending are human. It forces us to double down on what actually makes us uniquely human.
So it's an opportunity in your eyes.
Yes, by cultivating deep judgment, complex problem framing, and genuine emotional empathy, workers can secure their place in the professionalized tier of the future economy. We don't need better human machines anymore. We need better humans.
I think that is a beautiful sentiment, and I think it will unfortunately get a lot of well-meaning people laid off.
Oh, come on.
I'm serious. The AI revolution is fundamentally an era of augmentation, not just automation. While human skills are undeniably vital, the most empowering, realistic, and immediate path forward for the workforce is pragmatic mastery of AI tools. You don't have to be a software engineer, but you do have to understand how to design a workflow.
A workflow that will change in 6 months.
But the logic of workflows doesn't change. Building AI literacy, understanding how to deploy agentic AI to scale your output, and embracing this technology as a collaborative partner allows everyday workers to generate unprecedented value. You protect your job by becoming the person who commands the tools, not the person who simply critiques them from the sidelines.
Well, while we clearly disagree on whether the shield of human capability or the sword of AI augmentation is more important here, I think we have reached a vital point of convergence. The skills landscape is transforming at breakneck speed. The one thing the data from all these reports makes absolutely clear is that passive waiting is the worst possible strategy for any worker in any industry.
Absolutely. Whether you decide to invest deeply in your human empathy and strategic framing, or you spend your weekends building AI agent workflows to automate your busy work, the status quo is dead. You have to move. You have to become an active participant in your own upskilling.
The economic analyses we've discussed today paint a complex, sometimes contradictory picture of a labor market in total transition. We leave it to you, the listener, to decide whether to focus your energy on mastering the emerging tools of AI or deepening the cognitive capabilities that machines cannot replicate.
And there is a vast amount of nuance in these reports regarding exactly how these changes will ripple through different industries. It is something every professional really needs to investigate for themselves.
It is definitely worth exploring further because the transition is happening right now, whether we are ready for it or not. Remember that career ladder we talked about at the beginning of our discussion?
The one with the missing rungs?
Right. The one where the routine apprenticeships have been handed over to the machine. Perhaps the ultimate takeaway isn't that we need to learn how to jump higher to reach the remaining rungs. Perhaps we need to realize we are no longer climbing a ladder at all, but rather learning to pilot a completely new kind of machine. Thank you for joining us on The Debate.